a life of their own, and I want to get this issue headed off because I think it's more than a minor issue when it comes to our small communities that are placed on our major used highways.
If I may,
Please.
Essentially you do have the ability to regulate signage, so that's a given, but maybe what we can do instead of taking motions and, striking language now is the planning team and the consultant, they've heard your concerns regarding this particular issue, and we can take it back and maybe rework the language and look at some options for you that you can consider down the road, rather than going through the document and just striking language that may be important in other districts. Because Supervisor Colfax raised a good point. Give it back to staff and let us work with it a little further to fine tune and taking your concerns into consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I would be almost satisfied with anything except the word prohibited, period.
Okay.
I think that's...
May I suggest that you withdraw your motion, let the record speak that you have a problem with the word prohibition, and as we proceed, staff is certainly making a list as we proceed. Now that it's going to go out to public dissemination, who knows what in the world's going to come up for controversy, and that'll all be coming back to us. But on your personal list, keep this as a problem, and as we get to those dates in October, etc., then we start hashing it out and hopefully not punching it out, but working through these problems at that time, and not today go through and start stating personal opposition.
I will withdraw my motion. I'm not here today to nitpick this document. I've read it over pretty thoroughly, and I think I don't have, but with that one in particular, I have a real problem with it. Because to prohibit something, period, that's a stretch. It says nothing about discouraging billboards or anything. It just says it prohibits any new ones. And then there you go again. What constitutes a new one? Every time you change the wording on an existing sign, is that a new one? So,
well, and Supervisor Pinches, I agree. There is a brand new sign, I believe, that a certain supervisor advocated for, pointing out a direction to a national forest. Does that qualify as a billboard? So you've got a valid point.
because that area qualifies Long Valley too.
True. So you do have a valid point. You've withdrawn your motion, and your strong feelings are so noted, and I think we need to continue through this as we go, and this is the time for the board to be commenting on specific items just like this, and then I'll be going to the public thereafter. So we need to continue along down this line. So other supervisors, Supervisor Colfax.
I wonder if it'd be possible for the consultant to give us a sense, just a very brief perspective on the Anderson Valley meeting and how that is going to be filtered into the document, and under what remains to be done, what remains to be adjusted. What do we have in terms of up-to-date news about that set of meetings over there?
Yeah, well, basically there have been two meetings. First one was on June the 4th. I think it was June the 4th, and second one just a week ago. We spent basically an entire day with the Planning Commission listening to public testimony in June. Came back last week and listened to basically the entire morning again was devoted to public testimony, and then the Planning Commission delved into all the suggested policies that the public out there had come up with, and what they came up with is what's reflected in this document. So these are the policies that the Planning Commission felt should be included in this section. I think there are some folks here who were there at that meeting, some of the who actually wrote the Anderson Valley Plan, the local alternative as they called it. So I'm sure they may have some thoughts on how they felt that the Planning Commission did things right or wrong. But what's in here is what the Planning Commission felt should be in here. As I mentioned in the first errata sheet, there were also some very good ideas that came out of that meeting. that the commission felt deserved to be raised up to a countywide level. So we feel confident that what's in here reflects your planning commission's direction as to what the Anderson Valley policies should say. There were a number of policies that were suggested that went farther than some of these go in some of those areas, like local food production, more specific about limitations on wineries and tasting rooms. So you'll see, for instance, a more general action item in the errata sheet to come up with a system for regulating tasting rooms, as opposed to a very specific recommendation that came out of the community group. There were some very specific recommendations about water supply and monitoring and reporting on water issues that were suggested for the Anderson Valley section. So again, you'll see a recommended action item countywide to more generally state the need to go out and do that kind of reporting, monitoring, and study of water conditions in the county.
Thank you. But this section called community policies is a new aspect of the
Yes, it
general
is.
plan. So if Hopland were now at this particular juncture, and I'm just, not that this is something that I'm suggesting, but if Hopland were to say, well, wait a minute, Anderson Valley has its community policies specified in a way that it is not elsewhere in this document, would you can this document allow this intrusion, or does this mean, well, this infusion rather than intrusion? Can it take infusion of this kind of information? Can it accommodate new information based on, well, we never were really thinking in terms of our community. We were thinking about the county as a whole. Therefore, you don't have our community's specific preferences, needs, and issues.
Yeah, well, hopefully Hopland's, for instance, their concerns are in here. What this document does, though, is it highlights the value of having the public get more involved in the process. So when you look through the Anderson Valley section, it really benefited from that input. And the other sections will probably benefit from it as well. That can happen either now during this process of coming to a final general plan, or it could be using this as the basis, as the Anderson Valley section talks about, for doing UVAP-style plans for some of these other areas where you can get into more detail. So we have more detail here for Anderson Valley because the community took the time to put that together, and the Planning Commission had the time to review that and make recommendations to you. That can certainly happen during this process if, for instance, we get a whole lot of comments from Hopland. Might be appropriate for the commission to take that up, and as we did in Anderson Valley, look at those and make a further recommendation to about changes to this draft.
Thank you.
Excuse me, if I could add something too, that there is in fact a section on Hopland, which I'm sure you're aware, and it came out of an initial community meeting, albeit a number of years ago, and so, it may be that different people would comment on it now, but they certainly can comment on this as part of the draft, and it can evolve between now and the final certification.
Okay. Other comments from the board at this time? Supervisor, no, I don't see any comments coming, so